Next week on Home and Away in the UK, as Jo turns to hypnosis to recover her lost memories, she has a flashback that could prove key to solving her mum's case. After 2 years of avoiding it, David recently found the strength to look at the police file from the crash that killed his wife Christina. Daughter Jo had been driving when the car left the road, but she had no memory of how the accident happened, and despite a full investigation, police never determined the cause. The lack of answers tore the family apart. Lacey became convinced David had used his position to protect Jo, and she walked away from the family home. Fate brought them back together in Summer Bay 6 months later. David decided it was time to confront the past and try to mend the rift. Going through the file himself, David noticed there was no record of who made the initial 000 call. When he requested the audio, he was stunned to discover the caller was Jo herself, something she had no memory of. The revelation shook Jo, and for the first time, Lacey began to see how traumatized both her sister and Dad still were. With Jo's permission, David obtained her pathology results from the night of the crash, confirming she hadn't been under the influence. But even after unofficially reopening the case and exploring every avenue in case things were missed, David was no closer to the truth. Lacey continued to push Jo to remember what happened, determined that answers were still out there. Wanting to finally move forward, Jo began looking into hypnotherapy, hoping it might unlock the missing memories. Next week, Jo stops by the police station with some lunch for David, but there's an agenda tucked between the Buddha bowls. She finally tells him what she's planning. She wants to try hypnotherapy. If there's even the smallest chance of unlocking what happened the night of the crash, she wants to take it. David immediately worries about the emotional toll, but Jo refuses to live with the unanswered questions hovering over her. When they later bump into Bree, a concerned David asks for her advice. Bree doesn't dismiss Jo's idea, but she's honest. Hypnosis can be brutal, especially when the memory you're chasing involves trauma. With Jo determined to go ahead regardless, pointing out the trauma she's suffering with anyway, Bree agrees to provide the names some reputable specialists so she can explore things further. That evening, Jo crosses paths with Dane, Ethan Brown. When she mentions the plan, he gets it straight away. If he was in the same situation and had the smallest chance to repair his family, he wouldn't hesitate. The support is all Jo needs, as she heads straight back to David and makes it clear there's no turning back. She doesn't want to keep having panic attacks, or Lacey hating her, and wishes David himself could have closure. The following morning over breakfast, Jo confirms she has booked a session that very day. Explaining that it was either that or wait another 3 weeks, Jo's expecting pushback, but instead David negotiates. If she's going through with it, he wants it done at the station so he can be close by. Hypnotherapist Amelia, Megan O'Connell, meets them there, immediately understanding David's protectiveness. She explains the structure of the session and reassures him Jo will remain in control the entire time. Amelia begins by grounding Jo in a safe memory, as Jo remembers playing on the swing in her old family garden. Once Jo is steady, Amelia gently guides her to move towards the memory that has been blocked for 2 years. As she recalls the journey, something rises to the surface. Another vehicle, speeding straight towards them on the wrong side of the road. As Jo opens her eyes, she blurts out that it was a grey Mercedes, with the letters C and M on the number plate. Jo sits in shock as the magnitude of the revelation hits, with David rushing to his daughter's side to support her. As Amelia packs up to leave, she tells Jo they've made great progress. Jo is keen to go straight back under to see if she can remember anything else, but Amelia assures her that she's done enough for one day and needs to rest. Jo turns back to David. She's finally been vindicated. The accident was someone else's fault. Jo's keen to know where they go from here, but David reminds her that she needs to go home and rest. He promises that he will take care of things now, as he gives her a hug. David soon orders another officer straight to the computer to start running plate combinations. Cash walks into the frenzy, having returned from his time away, and immediately finds himself barked at by a stressed David. David quickly catches himself and explains that Jo remembered another car, and whoever was behind the wheel was responsible for his wife's death. Having returned from her trip with Theo, Lacey later thanks David for reopening the case, even thought it hasn't changed anything, and admits she's ready to move on. David keeps quiet about Jo's breakthrough, relieved to see the first hint of peace between his daughters. However, it only lasts until Cash casually mentions Jo's progress to Lacey at SALT, presuming she already knew. Lacey immediately assumes David has buried evidence and protected Jo yet again, and later confronts him, furious that he didn't tell her. If David's going to keep the peace he'll have to work fast, but does he have enough to go on?